my incredible pleasure to get to introduce Steve and Martha Ellis, who are renowned to most of us, perhaps, but nevertheless, these folks are sort of the foundation stone of Whidbey Audubon. Steve has been president at least twice, and Martha is always in close partnership with everything Steve does. Martha is a plant whiz. You were, I was a board member. Yeah, she was a board member. And when you go out on field trips with Steve and Martha, you get to learn about not just about birds, but about plants, because Martha is very active member of the Washington Native Plant Society and plant expert. Steve spent many years, in addition to being a board member, he served on the Conservation Futures Fund Advisory Committee and has been leading field trips and teaching programs, and invented the Birds of Whidbey course. How many people, I can't see you on Zoom, but how many people, raise your hands if you've taken the Birds of Whidbey class at some point? So about half, more than half the people in this room, and I know many people on screen. The curriculum that you get for that class is written by Steve and Martha. Martha does the typing and yes. So if you find about a bird and it says something about having white underpants, that's my typo. And something that 340 eggs or something. It's supposed to be that great job, and it was recently updated. Yes. So anyway, and they're wonderfully generous with my project. So we get to hear tonight about the Aerialists. So thank you for humoring us here. We got a couple of glitches, but we'll try to work around them. And I'm hoping everybody can hear us because the microphones are giving us a little trouble. So let us know, and we will try not to let our voices trail off. Okay. All right. So. All right, our current Whidbey bird list has 232 species. It goes from snow goose at the first to black-headed grosbeak at the tail end there. And of those 232, 22 are what we are considering aerialists. Those birds that make a living on the wing. So let's start with some species that sometimes catch their food in the air. So the part-time aerialists. And as weird as it seems, Kierman's gulls have been seen catching flying termites. I don't know if any of you have noticed that. Of course, the Kierman's is the one up on top there. And the short-billed gulls, formerly known as new gull, have done that as well. So sometimes you're going to. And that's why it's so important when you're out looking at birds, keep your eyes open and know what they're doing. We can all use this information. Hummingbirds, of course, eat in flight while nectaring, but if they're nectaring from a red flowering currant, it's stationary. It's not trying to get away from them. So they're the ones, they're not chasing it down. They do catch some small insects once in a while to have protein for their diet. And warblers often hover glean, and that means they pick insects off of leaves and twigs, but yellow-rumped warblers especially will catch birds in the, what am I doing, turning around this way, okay, that's right, sorry. But this is where my audience is. That's a little scary, isn't it? Okay, anyway, so they probably do more actual fly catching than any other warbler. Okay. And cedar waxwings will fly catch and hover glean, but they'll also perch in a tree and eat the berries and the blossoms. Now, many others will attempt to fly catch, but they're not particularly good at it. And you've probably, when you've been out in the field, you've probably noticed where they're kind of stumbling along or something. I mean, the robin apparently has a beak full of stuff there, so maybe that one's successful. Juncos will flutter after moths, But they're really much better just picking up seeds. And then our little sparrow over there is hopefully taking off, but we're not sure what it's gonna get.
Okay. Aerial obligates is a term that we sort of invented for this talk. It's birds that catch the majority of their food in the air. In fact, their food is flying at the same time. This happens to be a merlin, which is a small falcon. Here are the 3 falcons that you can find on Whidbey Island. The biggest one is the peregrine, the merlin, and then the little kestrel. Now, merlins and peregrines tend to hunt open areas and get most of their food in the air. Not all of it, they will catch things on the ground. Now, the kestrel will catch a few things in the air, but they probably do most of their hunting on the ground. So they're not true aerialist obligates in our talk. Here are the 3 exhibitors that are on our island. The sharpshin and coopers nest here. Northern goshawks generally are migrants or one might overwinter here. We've never seen them nesting on the island yet. Cooper's hawk is probably the most numerous of the exhibitors on the island. And these are the forest hawks, and they're built for flying through the woods to catch birds in the forest. We have a lot of flycatchers, and they have now just come up from down the tropics. Olive-sided flycatcher, western wood peewee, Pacific slope flycatcher, willow flycatcher. They all nest on the island. The Hammonds and the western kingbird are simply spring or fall migrants. We don't see them in the summertime. These guys do get almost all of their food in the air.
Do you want to hold off till we figure this out, or?
I'm not sure
No,
how
we
you
have that bar.
or just click on screen somewhere, like somewhere on the screen.
No. I think if you could look at more and
It's just
then
a shy hand.
it says hide, there was something that said hide. So it might.
I don't like to hide.
Hide the video panel, so let's just go down. Oh, there? Yep, try that. Well, no. It hit one of the panels. Keep going, yeah, try one more time. I don't know. Okay, so hide floating meeting controls, maybe. Yeah. Try that. There you go.
Oh, that was that last flycatcher.
Okay, now let me find my arrow again. All right, so are you ready to?
I'm just so ready to roll.
Okay.
Swifts may superficially resemble swallows, but they're actually more closely related to hummingbirds. And they are absolute aerial obligates. They have to catch everything they eat is caught on the wing. Now, we only get box swift in the spring and sometimes fall migrants, and black swifts are really rare here. They only come usually when it's really kind of cold and wet in the mountains in the summertime. They may come over and do some foraging here rather than where they're at. Swifts are really an amazing birds. The black swift flies more than any other bird here. They fly for 8.5 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are flying. They can do that because they turn off part of their brain at night while they're flying. I don't want any of you people here to drive home with your brain turned off as an experiment. I don't think that will work. I think swallows are probably the most recognizable of our aerialists here. All of these species, northern roughwing, bank, barn, cliff, violet green tree and the purple martin all nest here. Bank are really pretty rare, but all the rest of them are fairly common here, and they all take their food on the wing. Common nighthawk is the only member of this group that comes to Whidbey Island. And they're usually getting here about mid to late May. Has anybody seen or heard one yet? It's pretty early, and this awful weather we've had is not really conducive to common nighthawk. So they tend to hunt in the late afternoon to early evening, or into the evening period. And they absolutely do catch all of their food on the wing.
What kind of habitat? Where would they be hanging out?
Yeah, they'll be in open forests, or actually they go up high, so they can be above, but they come out of they nest in an area that has large trees that are scattered around. But they'll hear them flying over your yard.
Okay, so we're going to talk next about the 3 B's of the aerial prey, birds, bugs, and bats. And we're using the word bug to mean all flying invertebrates. So that's kind of playing fast and loose with it, but it lends itself to the alliteration. So starting with birds, birds as large as ducks are taken in the air. And then it's on down through hummingbirds in size, so that's quite a range. Typical prey species include peeps, which are small and fat shorebirds, and robins and pine siskins. And if you look at exhibitors in terms of maybe the humpback whales of our birds around here, and the siskins are very definitely the krill. Bugs are very important, of course, in the grand scheme of things, and Steve came across some research from a Swiss university study that said birds eat up to 550 million tons of insects per year. That's worldwide. That works out to 20 quadrillion individuals. I was an English major, so that's way beyond me. But obviously not all are captured in the air, but flying insects are mostly eaten by the aerialists because they're sharing the same airspace there. And all sizes of insects are taken, and it's most often the ones flying by day that are grabbed. Some night flying insects are captured by nighthawks and wild-looking swallows. And then bats. I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't know about bats, but some individual falcons, exhibitors, and even some owls will catch bats in the air.
So why be that?
I'm trying to get the camera to go.
What's up there that it's inside?
It's fine.
Just keep talking, you're already through this. Well, they can see the pictures.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Just talk amongst yourselves.
I'd like to, but there's a
Okay. Why the aerialists? Because it's easy to be a person who lost the computer.
Yes.
So you see this is a big flock of duck. Well, if you're aerialist, it's pretty obvious where your food is. You can really tell. You can see your prey. It's very easy to find food. There aren't many obstacles either. If you notice those clouds up above the actual picture there. You can flies really fast, you can make sharp turns, and you're not going to run into anything. There's not a lot of competition for the food source. Let's face it, you're not going to find a weasel or a raccoon up there trying to catch those dumplings. There just isn't any mammal competition. Maybe the bats, but.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We're trying to get the camera. to
Excuse
come
me,
back.
Patty. Excuse
What?
me. The audio is very garbled for those of us on Zoom. Is there a mic that we could use or?
Yep.
Thank you.
You hear me now?
No, not yet.
Get the lights on. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me? Sharon, can you hear me?
Reminded the congregation what Jesus said about, judgment. Forgiveness.
No, we don't. I know. Not at all. Okay. Let me do this.
Sorry, everybody. You'll have to be patient with us. It is better this time. But. Okay. Just moving my hand, that's right.
How far back was the garble? You could start over.
We can't. Sorry, I am so sorry. I don't know where it went.
There's back to meeting is in orange.
Sherry is always paid it really on time. Okay. What else?
Tell you about our camping trip. To Lake State Park, which is near Pateros. Well, we had a really good time. It was a little, the weather wasn't really great. Saw a lot of interesting birds. The coots and the ruddy ducks were all in their breeding plumage.
Redneck trees.
Yeah, so we sage speeds and western bluebirds, and, you know, the birds you imagine over there.
Lots of wildflowers. That was good too. This was just last week, yeah, Monday through Friday.
And which part was
Also Lake State Park, which is sort of near Chelan, actually it's Pateros, is where it's closer. Washington Pass opened after we got back home again. So we had to drop down to Stevens Pass and go, there was snow in the air. We had a couple of great horned owls in the campground there, including one that was roosting a couple of trees behind us. So we set up the scope and other people were looking at it. It was good.
Probably no baby groups yet.
Oh, no, they're still, they're still pairing out. Yeah, perfect. Very good.
Okay. I don't know if you can get anything on the speaker or not.
Okay, yeah, but the mouse is not up there. Do I need to be up there?
No.
Two.
Sharon? We're not hearing anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We have been, excuse me, we've been having trouble hearing because I don't know if they're too far from the computer or too far, if we have a mic we can use. But the audience has to be quiet and
Okay, Sharon, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, let me say that we have tried to do the microphone and have tried to go into the program to switch it over to the mic, but it still doesn't pick up Steve.
Okay.
I'm talking now, can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay. Are we gonna try this again?
Well, let me see this a second here. I am sorry this is taking so long.
Well, if
Hit
you can hear
escape.
Martha, she'll just do the program.
Hit escape, please. It's up a little bit. Okay, let's see now.
I'll use my alpha male voice.
Okay, just a second.
Okay, I'm talking into the mic. Can anybody hear me out there?
Much better,
Much better.
much better.
Okay, I think we got it now. All right, so the disadvantages of being an aerialist. Well, for one thing, if you can see your prey can probably see you. And so they can take evasive action. Now, there are some obstructions to work around. You can see this Cooper's hawk on the right there. You have to fly through those branches and twigs and thorns and whatnot. So you have to be careful not to get hurt. Also, if you're out there in the elements like that peregrine up there on the upper left, you're always exposed to the wind and the rain and the sleet and the snow. There's no getting out of it. If you're having to catch food in the air, you have to be out there in it. And you burn up a lot of calories because you're chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. It's much easier to land on a tree branch and eat a cherry or to fly down underneath the salal and eat some seeds. It isn't easy to learn to catch food in the air. Only about 36% or so of the accipiters survive their first year because it's so hard. It's much easier to learn how to eat a seed. And that's why we have more sparrows than we have falcons. And the cold weather immediately eliminates all flying insects. Some of the insects can get away into the bark and tree or something, and a creeper can come along and pull out a bug or a spider out of the tree trunk, but flying insects are all dead once it freezes. Okay, so we're going to focus on one bird out of each group. This is a barn swallow. They're 6 to 7 inches long, and they have a wingspan of about 15 inches. They're blue on top, and they have a rusty forehead, and the males are orange underneath, and the females are a little lighter. The long wings are tapered, and they have a tail that can be spread wide. The flight speed is fairly slow. They're flying at about 25 miles an hour. They can ratchet it up to about 45 if they're motivated. and their wing beats about 5 to 9 times a second. They have low wing loading. That means they have a lot of wing space for the size of their mass of their body. And what that does, that makes them highly maneuverable. They can make short glides, but they really prefer to just keep powering through it with their wing beats. They have large hearts for their body and a metabolism that is a metabolic rate that is much lower than other birds of its same size. They have a small bill and strong jaw and a wide gape so that when they're chasing down an insect, they can swallow it. Their eyes are kind of elongated and large, but by having them elongated like that, they're not sacrificing any brain space. Their visual acuity is really sharp, and they can see very well ahead of them and to the side, but not up and down. So now we're going to try and see a video of a bunch of barn swallows flying over this lawn. I hope you folks at home can see that. And you just see how many there are and how they're being able to fly without crashing into one another. There are dozens here. This is probably post-breeding. There's several dozen out there. You can see how low they are flying. I have no idea what that, yeah.
Well, and the lawnmower had just been over there, so I think that's what was putting up the incidents. It's being filmed by a guy on a riding lawnmower.
Okay, so barn swallows consistently fly lower than other swallows. This is a violet green swallow up there on the right. The barn swallows generally fly lower than 30 feet, most of the time just inches off the ground. I took this picture on the lower left there at Rosario, and you can see it's flying lower than the bench on the picnic table. The other swallows, like the violet greens, will come down on the deck if the weather is really bad. Okay. So foraging is done over fields and lawns and lakes and rivers. Their preference is to chase down large solitary insects. They're not going after clouds of gnats or something like that. They want to get a very large insect. They're chasing them at high speed and at low altitude there. So they have to keep those wings flapping even in the high or even in the sharp turns. So because if you tried to glide right there, you would end up crashing into the ground. 90% of the turns are done while flapping their wings. Yeah. Mated pairs may forage together during the breeding season, and they'll follow along farm equipment to see what the equipment is putting up. They will fly along around farm animals, and they've even been noted flying under cows and horses between the legs to catch insects. And they will even go around flocks of geese that might be putting up something for them to catch. These are the typical prey items for barn swallows: horseflies and beetles and crane flies. Once in a while, they will hover glean something off of a wall of a barn, but otherwise, they are totally dependent on catching flying insects. One of the things they will do is they will come to artificially lit places at night and catch things. I used to see them at the Coopville School tennis courts. We had the tennis courts lights on till about 11 o'clock at night, and they would be coming there to eat the moths that were attracted to the lights.
Okay, there we go. So now we're going to move along to the olive-sided flycatcher. They're about 7 inches long with a wing spread of 13 inches. And they're olive brown above with a gray sort of vest effect. They have a large bill with a pale lower mandible and white rump patches. And of course, you're probably all familiar with the male's quick 3 beers song in the springtime. Flycatchers have beaks that are flat and wide at the base, and many species have rictal whiskers, R-I-C-T-A-L. That's by the edges of their wide gaping mouth there. It used to be thought that that was sort of helping them catch insects, to sort of kind of like a net or something to help bring them in. But research now is indicating that perhaps it's more a case of the bristles sort of deflecting the insect pieces so that they do not get into the eyes of the birds there. Olive-sideds have longer wings than other flycatchers, and they don't usually fly close to obstructions like other species do. They need a little more open space. Except when they're in the trees. They appreciate conifers, and they're mostly going to be around those. They usually perch on a snag or the top of a tree. Females may use lower branches or the tops of root wads, where the base of the tree that's fallen is tipped up like that. And that means that they are foraging a little bit lower than the males, so they're not competing for insects that way. And trees with dead tops are preferred over just about anything else. In fact, the taller, the better with the trees. There was a study that showed that selected trees are 1.4% taller than the surrounding trees. So if you're somewhere like South Whidbey State Park or Fort Eby State Park, wherever it is, where you're looking out over the trees and you see one that's poking up, that's your prospect to find a flycatcher on top. In bad weather conditions, they will perch lower and they'll drop downwards to catch lower flying insects. They capture their prey by sallying out and grabbing a lone insect, and then they often return to the same perch, which is kind of a yo-yo pattern of flight going out and back again. They'll often wait for an insect to pass by rather than going out and actively patrolling. Pursuit of the prey might include multiple attempts to grab prey. If they fly out and miss the first time out, they'll just continue on a little bit and try again to catch it. The flights are usually 2 to 3 seconds in duration, but they may be up to 20 seconds. And most of the pursuits are horizontal or descending. You hardly ever see one flying up to catch something. And where am I now? Okay, they have deep, rapid wing beats, and that allows for very sharp turns because, your insect does not want to be caught. So they have to be flexible. Most of the prey is consumed in flight, but bigger insects may be brought back to a perch and whacked on a branch until subdued. Does that remind you of anything? Can you think kingfisher? That's what they do. So, okay. They often will have a backward head thrust sort of thing to help them with the swallowing of the larger stuff. And if they catch bees, which they do, they will bring them back to the perch and rub off the stinger and then manage to squeeze out the venom before they actually will swallow the bee. Their prey also includes carpenter ants and dragonflies. So, common nighthawk. They're not hawks. They can be out during the daytime, and certainly on Whidbey, they're not common. However, otherwise, the name just makes perfect sense, So they're 8 to 10 inches long with a wingspan of 23 to 26 inches. Robins are about the same length, but their wingspan is only 17. So you can see the difference there. They're mottled white and brown above with brown barring below. You can really see that white throat, and then the white patches on the wings really show up when they're flying. And you'll notice the narrow pointed wings and large dark eyes, a long tail, and just about the tiniest beak imaginable. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because Joe Sheldon just covered them in a program not too long ago. And they're becoming rare on Whidbey, so please report the sightings. But you can see how that beak is just barely a formality, and their gape down there in the lower left is absolutely gigantic. And they'll often sit longitudinally on things, so that you see them sitting that way on a branch or on a fence. Sometimes they'll go sideways. Yes, what were you gonna? Okay. Their foraging flight speed is 12 to 15 miles an hour and has been described as bat-like, which means they're very agile and they can do some quick jinking moves to go back and forth to track down or to pursue the prey. Sometimes they soar. Mostly they do continued flapping. And they do occasionally forage in small groups if there's a good supply of insects. So they're opportunistic feeders. Their gape is very large, as we've mentioned, and they can scoop up either masses of small insects or select a larger individual type of prey. And one study found a bird with 500 mosquitoes in its stomach. And I really don't know, I want to know about the poor research assistant who had to sort all that stuff out. The things we do in the course of protecting and learning about birds.
Okay, Cooper's hawks are 15 to 19 inches long with a wingspan of 27 to 37 inches. The females are much larger than the males, as most raptor species. The females are bigger, and they're just sort of a blue-gray on top, and on the below there, they're orange barring on a white breast. The bill is fairly short, but pretty large, and it has that nice hook on there for tearing flesh and for helping to remove feathers. The feet are really strong and they have very sharp talons. And they have long legs for reaching down into the grass, or when they're chasing a bird into the bushes, they can reach in and grab them. The wings are short and rounded for flying through tree branches. And that long tail is used as a rudder for steering purposes. Now they have several hunting methods. You can see the one perch there. They'll perch where they kind of blend into the background and then look for prey. Or do what's called a low patrol or contour flight. And that's where they just fly really low over the ground. They're hoping to see something just above them to attack or to push something out of a bush that's right ahead of them. I've seen them do that. I've been on hiking trails in the woods and see them at about knee level, just screaming down these trails, just waiting to see if they can put something up for them to catch. They also learn from past experience. And go back to the Coopville tennis courts. I worked there for many years, and the middle schoolers would go out there at lunchtime. They weren't supposed to, but you know, middle schoolers being middle schoolers, they'd go out and, believe it or not, they're messy eaters, and they would leave food behind. Well, that would attract the blackbirds and starlings. Well, there was one Cooper's hawk who knew that in the early afternoon, he could probably get a meal there. And he would come in from behind our maintenance building, which is right next to the tennis court. He'd go up and over and then just go right down into the tennis court, and the starling would fly up and he'd grab it. They may do that at your feeder if you're feeding. They may use your house as the blind that they come up from behind, or a lilac bush or something like that. But they know from experience to expect food there. They do hunt high in open habitats. And sometimes they imitate the fluttery flight of a pigeon or the roller coaster flight of a flicker, so that a bird will look up and say, oh, that's a flicker or a pigeon. I don't have to worry about it. And then suddenly the hawk is on them. Okay, so when attacking, they're on their target and they stop flapping their wings about 12 feet out. And at about 4 feet out, the legs come straight out. The talons are held horizontally and they hit their prey at about 25 miles an hour. They try to grab with both talons. They're most successful when they're hunting solitary birds, not a flock. So the prey is held away from the body. That's where those nice long legs come in again. And they kill by squeezing those talons into the body of their victim. They don't kill with the beak like hawks and the other hawks and the falcons do. What they're doing is they're trying to get a talon into one of those vital organs in the body cavity. And that's how they kill them. They've also been seen, believe it or not, taking a victim to water and drowning them. They hold the victim underwater until the bird stops struggling, and that's that. Mostly they take small birds or medium-sized birds, but they also do go after mammals, chipmunks, squirrels, deer mice. And several years ago, we had a really cold winter, and we had a Cooper's hawk that fed on a rabbit carcass in our yard, which is really weird, but so I guess they are scavengers at times. So they eat about 12% of their body weight every day. I would like to do that, but I'm pretty sure the doctor would not want me to eat about 18 pounds of food a day. I'm not sure we could afford that. But it's worth a try for science. They have a high metabolic rate, which requires frequent eating. And so that means about 700 kills a year for each Cooper's hawk. Has to kill about 700 times. They have chased things into bushes like this, and about 24% of Cooper hawk skeletons show breaks in the bones in the chest. So they're slamming into the brush. So I was wondering if there was an industry in the US where 24% of the workers had broken chest. I think the ocean might have a problem with that. Labor and industries. They often hunt near roads and are often hit by vehicles. And they have a success rate about half that of the buteos, the soaring hawks, like red-tailed hawks. So they do a lot of attacking without a lot of success.
This is by way of example, the Eurasian sparrowhawk. And whoops, come on. It's a very short video.
It's a short video. We're going to show it a couple of times. Okay. Okay, so now the next time we show it, think about that. It's done a couple of things here. It's doing that low flight or the contour flight. It's also remembers that there's birds on this bird feeder and it's coming from behind a hedge there. You can notice it. So it's pulling out all those tricks. I'm sure it's a falconer's bird. If you feed birds, you feed all kinds.
All right, so here's the peregrine falcon, 15 to 19 inches long, with a wingspan of 3 feet to 3 3/4 feet. So we've gone up considerably in size. They have bluish gray back, wings, and tail, and their head is sort of like a dark helmet on a light face, and they're light with dark gray barring and spots below, and big yellow feet. The dark below the eyes reduces glare. So think about baseball players on a sunshiny day and football players out on the field smudging the black stuff on their cheekbones. And then take a look at that close-up picture. You can see where the nostrils are, and there's a little projection there. There are baffles in the nostrils called tubercles, and that forces the air into a spiral when it's entering rather than jetting straight into the lungs, because when they're diving at their tremendous speeds, they'd pass out if the air were going directly into it. So this slows it down and puts it in a spiral motion like that. Their eyes are tremendously, they're very observant, and they pick up on all kinds of motion. They can process 70 to 80 images per second. Humans do around 21. So just very observant, very active, and yeah, wonderful. There's a triangular notch on the upper mandible. You can see that there just below where the lower mandible crosses. That's called a tomial tooth. Obviously, it's not a tooth, but it's a construction of the beak itself. And that's used for killing vertebrates by severing the spinal cord. So the keel, the breastbone is very large. That allows for attachment of really big flight muscles. They have an extra pair of vertebrae fused to the tailbone with enlarged muscles for high maneuverability in flight. They do some amazing maneuvers at very high speeds. They're able to pull out of a diving turn and brake at high speeds. But their wings are proportionately small for the body mass, so they have a very high wing loading. The wings themselves are long and pointed. The flight feathers are stiff for creating a smooth surface, which cuts down on drag. And their heart rate can go up to 900 beats per minute, which is just astonishing. And this is for maximum blood flow and oxygenation. And they make use of every little bit of advantage that their bodies can give them as they are in their hunting. They fly at about 30 miles an hour in normal flight. And they can turn it up to at least 60 if they're motivated. But the most astonishing part, or the part that people are always really interested in, is that wonderful dive, which of course is also known as a stoop, when they can hit speeds of up to 240 miles an hour. And when pulling out of the stoop and maneuvering upwards, they may experience 25 Gs. Now, the last time we were on a commercial jet and you took off and remember being sort of pushed back in your seat, that was about 1.5 Gs. I have never ridden along with a stock car driver, but I hear when you take a turn really fast, that's about 4. Fighter jet pilots may experience 9, and these guys are 25. And you'll notice that lower left there where everything is pulled together. His wings are tightened down, his feet are pulled in. He's about as aerodynamic as anything could possibly be. You look there in the upper right and you're looking at him sort of underneath, but he's starting a dive, which is sort of putting them into a kind of a spiral position. As they get into position, they power into it. They're not just relying on gravity, but gravity takes over and really serves them very well. So they go through a couple of configurations there. One is called an M configuration, and then it pulls into that just sort of bullet-shaped projectile. Okay. And this is the video that did not work, unfortunately. And it had a couple of pictures when in a dive when it was actually being recorded with the speed. And those potatoes measured in kilometers per hour, 300 kilometers per hour, which is just over 186 miles per hour in this just amazing drop. And then there was another section of there when he was following a pigeon, and pigeons can fly pretty quickly. And there he was being clocked at about 64.5 miles an hour.
He is such a gutsy. It's no big deal.
Okay. So they will perch fairly high during the breeding season. This allows for easy access to low and medium flying prey. And then later on in the season, they will use lower perches. And I've got a little note there. This is from UC Berkeley. I don't know if any of you have ever watched their webcams, but they lost Grinnell at the end of March. And the people who were just devotees of the webcam were heartbroken about that. He was found dead, apparently struck by a car. And the whole community who followed them online, they just started mourning. Grinnell and his mate Annie had been objects of devotion and much study over the course of their 6 years together. And they had hatched 13 chicks since pairing up in 2016. Now, there had been some altercations with Grinnell and a juvenile male, so we really don't know what caused that. But if you can get onto some of the wonderful webcams, they're great resources, and it'll give you literally a bird's eye view of what's going on. Like the hawks or the accipiters we were mentioning before, they may hug the ground in contour hunting, as the Cooper's hawk does, or they may soar higher up above and then keep an eye out for things down below them. And once the prey is spotted, oh, that's you, isn't it? Okay. No, go ahead.
So once the prey is spotted, which can be up to a mile away for medium-sized birds like a pigeon, they can see a pigeon a mile away. So once they've institute the stoop and catch things, the small prey is grabbed with the talons and taken immediately to a perching place. Bigger items, can you go back? Should be another slide there. They hit bigger items. You're missing a slide. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so we had a picture of a peregrine holding a grebe down on the ground. So bigger prey than just say a small little dunlin or something. They grab it, they hit it from the top and ride it down. If the thing is really big, they may just hit the head or hit a wing. And if you're hitting somebody's wing at 240 miles an hour, that wing is not going to be workable anymore. And so they just kind of spiral down and go with that. Okay. Are we back? So, okay. That's a wood duck there, by the way. But if it's a big duck like a mallard or a pintail or something, they will go down in the stoop and then pull up underneath and hit the vulnerable belly. And that knocks the bird out of the air.
Oh, that was the one with the grebe. So we were just out of order there.
Yeah. All right, well, okay. Next. Another method is called ringing, and that's when the bird tries to escape by flying upwards. And so the peregrine will fly circles on all the way up and until it gets spirals up above the bird and then makes these shallow dives until the bird gets caught or is just too tired to fly anymore, and the peregrine will grab it. Another method is called shepherding, and that's used on flocking birds, which is almost always shorebirds. And they'll dive on the margins of the flock, and they'll keep doing that until one bird misses the cue that everybody turn to the right, and it'll go straight out and get caught, or it'll panic and try to fly off on its own, and then it's caught. I don't know if I'll do my plucking joke. I guess I won't. All right. I had a joke, and it's not going to work. Okay. All right. Somebody wanted the plucking joke. So did you hear about the guy he always wanted to be on stage at Carnegie Hall? So he stole a harp and he snuck on there with an orchestra. And afterwards, the music critic said that took a lot of pluck. Okay, that's kind of well, I left a couple sentences out of there just to move it along here. All right, bats. So they'll take a small bird to a station like that and pluck it and eat it. Bats and insects are eaten in flight. Larger prey, say they catch a mallard or something, they would eat part of it on the ground before taking it up to the perch. So 429 species of birds have been recorded taken by peregrine falcons in North America. And with passerines, the songbirds like this red-winged blackbird, they take the males because they are flashy. So the cryptic colored females are left behind, left out. So one time we were at Oak Harbor City Beach, and there was a flock of turnstones right there. We were watching that, and this peregrine falcon came screaming in, maybe 5 to 6 feet over the beach, and all those turnstones just dropped down and tucked their heads down, and they looked like so many black rocks. And that peregrine looked so confused. He said, there were birds here, but now there are rocks. And so he made a turn and went over to Mailer's Point. And those turnstones immediately stood back up and went back to feeding. That stuff happens all the time. Okay, so they will hunt cooperatively as a pair, a mated pair. The female there is on the left. You can see how much bigger she is than he is. Sometimes an individual peregrine or a pair will focus on just 1 or 2 species in their territory. Maybe they just want to hunt horned larks or dunlin or something, and they'll ignore all the other birds. Some peregrines are adept at kleptoparasitism. That means they're stealing food from other raptors, and they do that by harassing them until they drop their prey. And so the red-tailed hawk on the lower left, and then up there the osprey, then the northern hairy on the right, and the merlin in the middle, and the Cooper's hawk on the lower right. Those are the main victims of that. And it's probably the females that do the most of that because they're bigger and more intimidating.
Don't you forget.
Whatever you say, dear. They often cache food, especially during the breeding season. And they'll stick excess food into a crevice in a cliff or down in a clump of grass. And sometimes the males will do that when they get to the breeding grounds first, and they'll cache food for the female when she comes. One study showed that males in winter consumed 104 grams of food per day, and the females were getting 114. I like the fuzz on top. In migratory populations, the young are on their own in 5 to 6 weeks post-fledging. So you've got a month and a half to learn how to catch a dunlin or some other shorebird, or you're just not going to make it. And the parents said, see ya. And in more stable population or populations where they don't migrate, as if it was here, the ones around here don't migrate, then they feed their young for another, for almost double that amount of time. Okay, so now we're going to show you a video of a goshawk, and it's just, we'll listen to the guy first and then we'll talk.
We're going to test Ellie to the absolute limit. This is how it's going to go. She is going to be on the other side of this wall, and I'm going to be here with the lure, which means that to get it, She's got to fly through that hole. The shriek has got to hole. Shape. Smooth. First, in real time. Now, slow down. And now by 40 times. Slow motion reveals how, with her wings closed, her large tail creates the depth that she needs. Let's make the hole smaller. Look at her eyes. You can see her protective nictating membranes closing. They're semi-transparent eyelids that keep out the thoughts. Rotate the slit to simulate the swelling gaps between trees. And it seems able to mold her body to any shape. Next, I want to simulate a tunnel through the undergrowth.
No, it was just.
And he turns the situation to her advantage, using her legs to launch herself to its prey.
Okay, so I want to watch it again without the sound, maybe. But I want you to pay attention to the watching the head. That head. So he has a lure that he's turning, and that's what she's focused on. And she knows that if she gets to that lure, he's going to feed her. And so that's just like catching something. So just watch how steady that head is. Now, this is a nice plastic thing, but if she were in the wild, she would be going through tree branches and stickers and thorns and leaves and twigs and getting beat up. So now watch that head when she comes through. She's coming. She is focused on that lure, because that's where the food is. It's like they say, keep your eye on the ball. That's exactly what she's doing there. Just that concentration, knowing where all your extremities are. It's just so hard for some of us. She has to duck down, but that head is still level. A little bit of a turn there. Incredible. Not a problem, right through there. That head is still level.
Okay, and so the show must go on. There are some silly nature shows and videos out there, mostly aimed at kids, that pit one wildlife species against another in mock Olympics. The Aerialists could easily be actors in such anthropomorphic productions. Consider the surgical precision of the olive-sided flycatcher removing stingers and venom from bees with just their bills. And then there are the barn swallows, literally on the fly, making rapid calculations that would challenge a computer. Or how about the moxie of a Cooper's hawk crashing into a bush in pursuit of prey? Or the thrilling athleticism of a peregrine pulling 25 Gs. As humans, we simply aren't capable of performing any of these acts, not on our own, without outside equipment. After all, we're not part of the Marvel universe. We don't have superpowers. But competition like that could make for some good entertainment, couldn't it? Except for one thing. This isn't for show. If the individuals are to survive, if the species are to survive, these birds must do these things every single day, often multiple times. Failure is fatal. The show must go on and on and on. And being an aerialist is definitely one tough way to make a living. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, yeah, they don't,
This here right now is my education.
I'm not sure what I'm,
You're bluffing.
oh, okay.
You want me
So,
as much as I want you.
so they're saving energy by having a low metabolic rate. I'm supposed to be facing this. So yeah, they're saving energy by having a low metabolic rate. Try to find
Really? You don't remember apologizing? Don't blame yourself.
I apologize. I'm no good at this tech stuff, and
Steve, Steve, could you repeat the questions?
the question was about the metabolic rate being lower with the barn swallow, and that's a way of saving energy. The higher metabolic rate you have, the more energy you expend, and so the more food you have to catch and eat. Anybody in the room have a question?
Open. It's a beautiful word.
Mhm.
Offices, homes, stages, possibilities.
Well, they eat bats and insects. Catch small birds and eat like or could most of the time don't.
So I protect it.
Steve and Martha are getting a lot of thank yous and compliments on the chat. So thank you, Steve and Martha.
Very kind. Well, you've all been very patient with us. We appreciate it.
This is not our optimum process here, so it's the same. Yes. As we like to say, you can't go wrong with good material, and birds are definitely good material.